My name is Ryan Wagner. I'm the head of partnerships and growth at Trinity Wealth Advisors here in St. Louis, Missouri. And today we're doing a fun webinar that is going to explore a lot of different topics. So if you are, you're a business owner, you work in fundraising, you want to know how to give passionately to maybe it's Impact City, maybe it's anything else, or more topics. Those are types of things we're going to talk about here because I know in Trinity Wealth, we meet with people and families and individuals that generosity is oftentimes a component of their broader financial strategy. And we see that is a primary component of what we help craft and help navigate with families. And we want to do that most efficiently as possible. We don't want to leave things on the table when I believe truly that people are really more powerful than they think they are, oftentimes, particularly at a generosity component. And so to have that conversation, we wanted to have Aaron DeLoach, who is the president and CEO of Impact City Football Club. I've known Aaron for a handful of years now, and they are doing great things around not only St. Louis, but multiple cities around the country with even another international component. So, Aaron, I'll hand that to you in just a moment. You can share a little bit more about what Impact City looks like. And then we have our CEO and founder here at Trinity Wealth, Jim Matoush, with his decades of experience in the financial services space. It's all he knows. He knows more stuff. But goodness gracious, if it's possible at this point, you've probably come across an example in your working days. Jim, thanks for bringing your expertise here this morning to represent both Trinity Wealth Advisors, but also opportunity and creativity for people that you've been helping people navigate that for many years, like I said. Before we jump in, we're going to have some Q&A, and obviously this is just going to be very conversational throughout this time because we're going to touch on a bunch of different topics. But Aaron, tell us a little bit more about Impact City Football Club. I know there's people that are attendees that are already fans. There's some people that are listening right now. They go, oh my gosh, I've never heard of this. Tell me more about it.
Yeah, Ryan, number one, thanks for just inviting us into the conversation. Jim, thanks so much for all that you do, and really excited to be working with you guys. As I think the key word is that you help people, right? Like you help people make a difference in the world. And
You
really,
say that, Aaron. I honestly boiled down my job the other day. I was like, what do I boil it down to? It's meet people and then help people. So I
yeah,
have had that thought, honestly, and I know it sounds cliche in some
yeah.
ways, but it's motivating.
And I would say on our end, we're a faith-based nonprofit. We're 6 years old, but the reason that we existed was to help people, right? Like literally there is that component to both Impact City and Trinity Wealth. And just grateful for us to have this conversation today. Really, our thrust is that 40% of the world plays soccer. That's a lot when you think about the number of people in the world, 40%. There are a lot of problems in our world today, but I think and we believe that the biggest problem in our world today is not the lack of clean water or sex trafficking or world hunger. It's that people do not know who Jesus is. And so we help people through the game of soccer find and follow Jesus in a way that they start to live in their community, where they love their neighbor, where they become leaders in their household, in their business. 2% of players are going to go on to be professional players. 98% of players are going to go on to be a pro dad, a pro business owner, a pro firefighter, and they're going to lead in those spaces from a kingdom perspective because of their time at Impact City. And we don't do it alone. Our staff doesn't do it alone. We do it in partnership with a group of generous donors who say, we want to make a difference, and we might not be able to play soccer, but we see the value that you bring, and we want to play our part through our generosity and through our giving. And so that's why this conversation is super important today.
So Jim, maybe you can touch on here as we get started. How have you seen that played out within some of the clients and people that you've helped amongst the years with how they touch organizations like Aaron's?
Thank you, Ryan. I will tell you, I've been in this business for over 40 years, and the first 20 years of my career, I didn't really know other than helping people hang on to more money. And I thought that was a noble thought, and it was an important thought, and that's why people came to see me. Along the way, I became a believer and saw the light and realized money was worthless for money. There is no happiness or joy. And along this couple of decades of meeting people, I could see some are really happy and joyful and really do well with their. It didn't happen to matter how much they had or didn't have.
Yeah.
But the real magic along the way was when they realized what their purpose was. Why am I here? And what we recognized, and that became the advent of Trinity Wealth Advisors as a different company pursuing the financial planning space, is connecting people with their purpose. So every person has a purpose. It's unique and different for each person. And what we're able to do is come to pull all the complexity of life in an ever and constantly changing world into this matrix that says, how can I make a difference?
Yeah.
What is my purpose? How does this tie together? For example, Aaron, you've got people that are passionate about Impact City and soccer, and some about Jesus,
Yeah.
and some about both. And what they often come to us is saying, I'd like to support these guys, but I don't know quite how. And I've got 20,000 in my checking account, but how can I go beyond that? And do I have enough? I can
Yeah.
remember the first donor that we helped give $1 million away, and he was the business dean at a Christian school,
Mm.
and only upon realizing that upon his current estate plan showed him that upon his and his wife's death, his children would each be giving $600,000 a year away. And he said, we don't give $600,000. What are we waiting until we die?
Yeah. Let's have the
So,
fun right now. Let's have fun doing that now. Yeah.
and that culminated in him making $1 million gift. And Westminster is part of Westminster today because of people stepping forward when he and his wife realized, oh, that's part of our purpose here. That's why
Yeah.
we have this. And we're not enjoying it by just saving it up for our kids to give. Any rate, Ryan, long answer to your question, but that's what we get joy out of, is connecting people with, what, regardless of how much you have. My favorite parable is the talents. And Americans consistently want to complain like the Israelites. Why did I get 2 talents and he got 5 talents and he got 10? It's like, why did skip all of that? What are you doing with what you did? Because when Jesus said that poor widow who put in the mite gave more than anybody else, it's how can I, and what we do, which I'm sure we'll talk about today, is show people how to leverage, how to make
Yeah.
greater impact with what their purpose is. And when they connect in with that, it
Well,
makes a
Jim,
difference.
speaking of that, the title of the webinar today is Giving Beyond the Checkbook: How Purpose-Driven Families Align Generosity with Their Wealth. So
Yeah.
when we say give beyond the checkbook, Jim, what are we talking about exactly? Because I think people typically, you go to an event like one that impacts city fun, you go to your gala, your dinner, your fun thing, and it becomes very visionary, great storytelling, everything's presented well, and then you're sitting down at the table and you're sitting next to your wife and they're saying, okay, what kind of commitment would you guys like to give? And you want to give. You want to. And you lean over to your spouse, you're like, hey, sweetie, how much? So it's very spontaneous. It's very oftentimes not very thought out. Some people, and I've met some people, know going into events like that, knowing we're going to give this down to the penny. Or they'll say, anyway, I'm getting over my skis here a little bit, but what are some tools, Jim, that if you're recommending someone going into that dinner or an event or any organization that they care about, what are some different ways of thinking that they could introduce into their financial picture that could be advantageous? And I'm debating things like donor advised funds. People talk about those. Some people have never heard of those before. How is that a tool? I know in our office, I'll quote our advanced planner. He says they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. He loves them so much. So why do people love them?
Donor advised funds are simply a tool. I'm going to back up a little bit to your first question. The thing we tell people to do is pray. So, and be open. I'd love to hear some of Aaron's stories about strange and crazy gifts. And almost all of them come from a prayer discussion and oftentimes we get to see the miracle of people saying something like, we think we're supposed to give
Yeah, a horse.
X. And
Yeah.
yeah, a horse. I know my wife and our first experience was I was on the deacon committee. I was chair of the deacon committee at our church. This is 20 years back. And I'm involved with the church in doing a fundraising capital campaign for this building. And me as a natural person, I am all about looking good. I'm just built like that. So right out of the bucket, I'm like, honey, I think we ought to give this. My wife is just the opposite. I think we ought to give this. And whoa, we're listening to the guy who's leading our discussion as a church and how to give appropriately. Yeah. And the guy says, pray about it. So we both pray about it and look at each other rather sheepishly and say, what's he telling you? And
Yeah.
my wife says, no.
You go first. No, you go first.
Yeah, you first. So we both agreed to write it down on a piece of paper and then reveal. And amazingly, it was the same number. And so we are both so stunned. And this was about 50 people in the church being led by this guy who was leading this campaign, fundraising campaign, which, Aaron, you've probably been in a bunch of them. And I was so stunned by the answer. I said, listen to what happened to us. I was here. My wife was here. We came up with this number, both exactly the same dollar figure. And the guy leading the campaign said, why are you so surprised at that, Jim?
Isn't that how God works?
Don't you work with money? And I said, why, yes, I do. And he said, you were both asking the same God. Why do you think he would give you, maybe you struggle with knowing God's voice? And I was like, wow, man, yeah. So there's so much that giving can do for you and recognizing God's voice and being confirmed on that. But to come back to your question about DAFs are a great tax maneuver to leverage what you're giving. So oftentimes when people come up with something that's out of the norm and they don't understand how, they'll ask first, how much is enough? And that's where they come to us and go, do I have enough? This doesn't sound right. No one comes to us and says, I have enough. I don't need any more money. It's really rare. So how much is enough is something we always address. And then if we want to get creative, proactive, forward-looking, like that example I gave you earlier, we can often show people how, whoa, you could get Uncle Sam to foot a lot of this to leverage. If you were going to give 10,000, if you were going to give 1,000, if you were going to give 100,000, how could you leverage that gift up with tax savings? And a DAF is one of the tools that we can talk more about if you want.
Yeah. No, I was going to say the DAF is a powerful tool. You guys have a lot of probably other things that you have to offer. But I think a lot of generosity comes to like your heart and your understanding of so many of us set getting goals, right? Like I want to earn this much income. But then there gets to a place where your heart settles into some of the things that God wants, and you go, what about giving goals? And how do I maximize giving goals to make a difference? And I think the different services and pieces that you guys provide can help people do that in a greater way. And for me, when we're sitting with people and talking about generosity, like I'm always saying, here's the need. Does this sound like something you'd like to be a part of? Would you like to make a difference in this way? And would you pray and ask the Holy Spirit how much he'd have you to give and just be obedient to him? And the people that usually respond are the people who have been proactive and have a foundation set up when they sold a business, who they're prepared and they've thought about, I've got giving goals. I believe that this is a part of what God has called me to do. There are people who have donor advised funds set up. There are people who have systems in place already. So when the need comes, they're able to respond. And those are the people that have made like the biggest difference for us at Impact.
I'll tell you, Aaron, I mean, I didn't say this in my intro, but in my background came from also the faith-driven nonprofit type
Yeah.
space. And the last almost 10 years of us being there, we would go to these larger donor events. And this is an organization that has almost 50 years of existence. And so they had big, robust donor development team and systems in place. And part of those would be we would do these larger donor events twice a year. We had different representatives that would strategically invite people into that room, and we would ask for millions and raise millions. And part of that process was, I remember they would have a different financial firm there. The language was very careful. We would never endorse them, but they would help endorse the foundation that we were part of and different things. Anyway, this is a whole nother background thing. But what they would do is say, hey, we're having a webinar or a luncheon, not a webinar, we're doing a luncheon here because our events were 4 days, 3 nights, longer events.
Yeah.
And if you're selling a business, estate planning question, trusts, changes in the tax law, whatever you want, we're just bounce it off us. Okay. And I remember it took me a little while, at least my early years, to realize why are we okay, it's a resource for them. That's cool. But why are we making this such a big? And I got smarter and wiser from that angle saying, oh, we want our donors to be as smart, sophisticated as possible. We already know that they care about us. So why don't we help align them with those types of conversations? And to your point, I remember seeing the people that were able to just make impact the way that they wanted to in that way. They did the work. They met with either
Set up before.
a
Yeah.
person or, in Jim and I's case, a team here at Trinity Wealth Advisors. I mean, we dedicate a team when there's no one building a book of business kind of thing. We help families help structure themselves in that way. And that's why I love the intersection of this webinar. I love the intersection of this is, and we've literally had people sit in our conference room right down the hallway, and I've watched it on their face when we'll say, hey, we would suggest putting $100,000 in a donor advised fund by the end of the year. And we will save you X amount of money in taxes, blah, 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 not to get into the details. And at first they're excited. Oh, wow. Yeah, we can already generously minded. And then you can see it becomes another to do. Even at the giving point, they're like, oh, wow, that's a lot. I don't know how to give that much because they're having a liquidation event, they're selling a business, and things are changing in their life internally. Their identity was this business. And now that business is going away, but it's giving them great opportunity. So just the emotions of money and how that ties into who we are and how we touch on legacy as families and all that. Aaron, I have a question for you before we go, and we can come back to donor advised funds if you want to, but from a nonprofit leader's perspective, what does it look like when a donor gives more with intention versus kind of my example? Oh, you sit down at the dinner and you write down
Yeah.
with your spouse. So what is the difference? Have you felt that as a nonprofit leader, now with a good many years under your belt?
Yeah, I
How does
think
that change the relationship?
they feel like true partners, not like they're tipping. it's like this ministry is their ministry just as much as it's the staff's ministry, as much like we're in it together, right? One might proclaim the gospel, one might teach soccer activities, one might give, but they all have an equal partnership in that. And that's the way that we want to treat it. And that's the way I think biblically we would look at it. Like, man, one sows, one waters. So like God brings the increase. And I think then there's a difference of, hey, I came to an event and it was nice and it was good. It's not really, doesn't fully align with my values. It's not fully in my interest. I don't fully have a plan of how I'm going to give. It feels more like a tip and, hey, it was a good event. Just want to make sure my steak is covered and don't really talk to me. Like, I don't care about the stories. I don't care what about the impact. Don't send me videos. Like, here's my tip, leave me alone kind of thing. And I'm not saying that's not valuable, right? It's all helpful.
Sure.
But it's probably the difference for me is it feels like a partner who I'm like, hey, here's what's going on. We're in this together. Somebody who's, hey, I believe in you. Okay, go do your thing. Don't talk to me anymore.
But what I do hear you say is that there will be steak at the next one. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
If you come, yes. No. Yes, there will be steak for all. There you go.
One thing I realized I didn't mention, this is for those that are in live attendee. I did not mention if you have questions. So if you do have questions, there's in the bottom, there should be a little part that says Q&A. Don't put it in the chat. Don't do that. Put it in the Q&A. We'll be able to find those. And you can do that anytime starting now during this whole conversation. We can get to those. So as those come up, we'll be happy to answer those both in philosophy of giving and generosity and also the tactical pieces. And one of those I want to touch on, Jim, I want to ask you something in regards to, we've mentioned it maybe once or twice now in this conversation about selling a business. Now, there are people that, many people own businesses. We've talked a lot, even here in the firm, about we're entering into this generational landscape of that boomer generation had really, they're in that point now in their life where they've already started to retire. They've owned these businesses. Some went to college, some didn't. It was part of the conversation, but not everybody did it. They had grit. They started businesses. They were successful. And the option of selling it to either kids looks different depending on the family situation, or they're going out and selling those businesses on the market. That's a different webinar. But you've mentioned before, Jim, I remember saying, hey, before you ink that deal, before you sign it, you come in and you talk to us because there are very important things that we need to discuss, particularly if for tax reasons and other things that go beyond just charitable purposes. But this is a charitable conversation. So what do you mean by that, Jim, when you're like, talk to us first because there's value there?
Let me give you a real life example that we faced this last year. Towards the end of the year, business was up for sale. Owner comes in, talks to us, did talk to us before. It's so funny. We were talking about this at a recent party we did for you, Ryan, and another one of your friends heard us talking about it. And he said, wait, I've got a business and it's being sold. Can I do something like that? And it was like, oh, the deal, it's already being sold, too late. But let me tell you three different options that happened for this particular client. His interest in the business was about $3 million. And they were both tithing type givers. I want to give 10%. And the first option is, oh, we could take 10% of that, put it into a DAF, which we already started talking about. So $300,000, and we get a tax deduction to help offset some of that big tax gain that we got from sale of the business. Second option was, oh, if we made a gift of that business interest, 10% of the business into the DAF before the sale happened, then we don't have to pay taxes on that $300,000. And we get the full $300,000 deduction. So there's a double whammy there. Third option that they wanted to look at was or we persuaded them to look at, was a charitable remainder trust. where the amount goes to the charity. So perhaps, and so they started considering a much larger donation. They continued to receive income from this asset. So there we were talking about $1 million gift that they would receive income from, and upon their death, the $1 million goes to the charity. Now, Aaron, what you guys talk about this is planned giving
Yep.
versus immediate giving. And one other that I want to have you circle back to at some point, Ryan, is a guaranteed easy way for Aaron to double the impact of certain types of donors. So I want to make sure, I want to throw that out as a teaser that Aaron,
You can't leave us hanging with that, Jim.
Oh, you want to hear that one now?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to do it now.
This is one of my favorites. And I have numerous clients could tell you this changed their life and it's so much fun. But Aaron, you've had people that can give, and they're very private.
Yeah.
They don't want anything to know about it. They don't want anybody to know about it, but you know that they are significant influencers in their community. These are people that have a gift by God. We know that they just, other people tend to recognize them as an influencer. Let's say one of those people decides they're going to give 10,000. Let's say that they're going to give 100,000. But how many times, Aaron, does someone come to you and say, I'd like to give this $100,000 in a matching gift. If you can raise 100 to match this 100, we'll give you a full 100.
Yeah, we'll release it all if you can match it. Yeah.
And what I know that when I tell charities about this, they go, wait a second, that's pressure on our part. And I go, what do you think about the pressure of the people letting go of $100,000 is? But after it's over, when you've had the ability to go out to your donors and say, listen, if you'll give us $100, if you'll give us if you'll give us 5,000, that's 10,000. And has that worked for you before, Aaron? Have you tried that?
We've tried some matching gifts. Usually the person is planning to give it anyways. I don't know if we've had much success at it. Maybe we haven't had a good strategy, but
on our side of the table, where it works really well is someone that wants to give, they're questioning, do they have enough? And we'll immediately stretch them. They've gotten this prayerful $100,000. Can we give $100,000? And what we do is we say, what if you gave them 200,000? And they'll go, no, wait, we didn't know if we could even give 100,000.
yeah.
I go,
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, you could give 200,000 in a leveraged way by
Yes.
saying, hey, this 100,000 is,
It's here.
and if they don't get the match of 100,000, which I've rarely seen any of you guys miss that kind of an opportunity, but you can still give 100,000. You don't have to be, but it does stretch and help the benefit. Once you get past we have a foundation that does that called the Brown Sisters Foundation that started with a couple of ladies, and that's one of the areas where we perfected that.
Yeah. I have a question, Jim, other than cash or selling of a business, what are the other ways that where can they give from? I know sometimes we have people say, I've got stock, or like, how do they give stock? And are there other things that are like that people can give from?
What Jesus shares in the parable of the widow's mite is that the Pharisees and the Sadducees, forgive my Jim Matushism on top of it, but they're going by the bucket and they're throwing in cash out of their pocket and hearing the clang. That's, and they really realize their gift at the time. The widow puts the mite in, and Jesus says, "You gave more." So that concept is transforming. Wait a second, am I giving out of my checking account, which is money available, the dribs, the drabs, the bones? What's in your checking account? Most of us that are doing astute money management, we don't leave much money in our cat. We might get a bonus. We might get something that happens. We're proactive tax planning. Maybe we'll circle back to that. A huge trick in our world to leverage tax deduction and giving impact. But if you'll go from what's in my checking account to what does the Lord bless me with? Business owners have this huge problem because their business is illiquid and they might be a millionaire, a multimillionaire, but they don't feel it.
Yep.
They feel poor
Yep.
because they don't have it. It's not all sitting in a checking account. Now, when we look at proactively what's coming in, how it's working, if you look at stocks as an easy one where it's a public stock and it is available, let's say you've been part of the tech boom and fortunate to buy into NVIDIA
Yep.
and you're, or Amazon or Walmart or any of these companies where you've had an unexpected and incredible boom. We had somebody with Micron that came in and their portfolio was 3/4 in Micron because they'd been investing in Micron since the 80s, and just with the tech pop had blown way up. Their portfolio's way out of whack. They lost $500,000 in the April downturn last year, 2025, when all the tariff scare worried people. They
Yep.
didn't lose it. It just went down in value. But my point being, if you'll get beyond just what's in the checkbook to realizing, oh, I've got money here. And even when you don't want to give up the position, let's say you've got NVIDIA and I want to take some of it off the table, you give, oh, that position is now worth $500,000. I could give $10,000 of that, 20,000, maybe even 100,000, because frankly, I invested 10,000 and it's now worth 500,000. Yeah, that's clearly a blessing.
Yeah.
Way beyond anything that I can ever expected. And how do you give that through either the DAF, and maybe we should talk about details of DAFs, Ryan, if you want, but the DAF is just an entity that might be the Matoush family charitable entity. And once I gift 100 shares of NVIDIA to my DAF, I can buy back 100 shares if I want to keep NVIDIA and not sell it. But now I can sell that 100 shares of NVIDIA worth now tens of thousands of dollars, and I have a tax deduction and no taxable gain on the sale of it. So that's giving from your nest egg, even replacing it if you didn't want to give it up now. But by maneuvering and repositioning, you're not limited to what's in your pocket able to clang in the bucket. It's, oh, I'm giving from who I am, which I think is what Jesus was saying from the widow, is that might meant a lot to her. That meant food for the next week. And here's something that I'm given. And I think most of us that have been around have seen that food multiply, that gift, that promise.
Jim, let me ask you, go back to DAF. We'll touch on that again, but just if someone's listening, they're like, I just don't even know. Where do you even go? How do you do it? What is it? Is it go to a website? So like people What's the first step if I'm interested in setting this up for me or my family, but I don't know what to do next?
Uh, Almost any financial advisor or any brokerage custodian knows what a donor advised fund, DAF, is. If they don't, you probably need a different one. Now, they call us. We're happy to point people in the right direction, whether you're working with us or not. So we
Because they
love.
do, donor advised funds will have small fees, but at the same time, there are returns within donor advised funds. So those are two things to consider.
You can take the money. So let's say you put that NVIDIA into your DAFT. I bought it for $10 and it's now worth $800. So huge gain on this. I can take that large gain stock, put it in the DAF. The day that I put it into the DAF, if that happens to be December 28th, I get a full deduction as long as it's a long-term gain. I may be getting too into the weeds here, but as
Mhm.
long as you've held that asset for over a year, and that's very important, I can get the full deduction of the market value for my taxes. So I'm getting that full $800 price deduction, and I don't have to pay that $5 purchase to $800 gain in income taxes. And I get that deduction against my ordinary income. So there are some significant tax benefits, and that's called a DAF, a donor advised fund. I shouldn't say every, most brokerage facilities, custodians, Schwab is who we use primarily, Pershing, Fidelity, they all have them. And for those that aren't going to give it all away right up, maybe we're batching our giving, another maneuver that we help people with proactively looking at their tax planning. I've got a big year. I'm going to make my giving for the next 5 years. In this business owner that was selling this family business, and
Right.
I mean, they gave on average $15,000 a year, and they're making a $300,000 gift, and they can take 10 years of giving out of that 300,000. So now think about walking through the world when you're praying about how much I'm going to give to Impact City to support something that my kid has been powerfully impacted. I've got a whole giving pocket here that I get, and my wife and I pray about it, and we give from what we have, not from what's in that checking account
Yeah.
that
So
happens.
you have this big liquidation moment, selling of a business, for example, could be stock, I guess, as well. But so you're saying, Jim, then you put the gains of all that within a donor advised fund, and a family could use that as their ongoing. I mean, it has tax leverage to it as a deduction standpoint, but you can use that every year. And what is remained does have some growth to it, but the idea is that once it's in there, it's being given too, by the way. That was not quite mentioned, but once you slide that right over into the donor advised fund, it has to go to a 501(c)(3) from then on out.
Exactly. Once you're not going to change your mind on this, but you can determine the timing and you can invest it to continue to grow. I think here's another point, Aaron, for that you probably recognize. It's Luke 12:48. It was something that convicted me very heavily. To those who much has been given, much is expected.
Yeah.
And we know who we are. For the most part, there's the haves and there's the have-nots. And the have-nots are always asking the haves, hey, share a little bit of this. Help me out. I need some help. And so, for the most part, I will tell you, having 40 plus years of working with haves and trying to leverage what they give impact wise, because that's where the most joy and money comes from giving. having financial independence is important, but giving back really is a testament to I have enough. And nothing puts a smile on God's face more than us as his children going, you've given me enough. Oh, what did the Israelites have in the desert? All the manna. It's kind of, oh, and we have enough for the day, and we can eat that and count on it's going to come tomorrow.
Yeah.
So
I
that
think
living by faith, there's a lot to that. And what were you going to say, Aaron?
I was going to say there's two things that I really love about a donor advised fund setup. And the one is that if I fund that thing at the end of the year, I'm not tracking down the 9 or 10 or 12 organizations that I gave to get my tax receipt. I gave to the donor advised fund. So everything's there. I know how much I gave, exactly how much I gave. I'm not having to track down the receipt from somewhere else, which is always fun on the back end. Saves me a little headache.
Consolidated paperwork. How about
There it
that?
is.
It's
And
big.
let me tell you what goes on in the mind of the donor. I can tell you when you give money and you give poorly, it haunts you. And oftentimes the haunting gift is I have to give this away before the end of the year. I have to do, and the charities are now all screaming at me because they know that fully 40% of their giving comes in at the last. So they're all, you get this barrage and they go,
Yeah.
oh, I don't. And most donors are plagued with, I don't want to say no. It's such a good cause. That's where we come into the picture is helping, learning where I can say no so that I can say yes in a much more significant way.
Yeah, and how do you guys help donors figure out what aligns with them? One of the things that we've talked about and have tried to put in practice is I want to present a giving opportunity that's good for the donor, that's good for the organization. This makes sense to you. And so, do you guys have anything where you help clients figure out like what's meaningful to them and what are their giving priorities? And sometimes I'll ask people, would you consider putting Impact City in your top 3 philanthropic priorities for the year? And some
Yeah,
people have
Aaron, those are conversations I love to have. Those are areas I'd love to continue to lean into where even the past 6 months, I've been trying to be more ingrained into St. Louis. I know Impact City's in multiple cities, but in St. Louis, it's a very charitable, philanthropic cities.
it
We are
is.
not short of great organizations to give to, Impact City being one of them. And so I've been able, I think, for the families that we want to serve, I want to be as educated as possible regarding what's happening around the city and beyond. And I've been trying to connect. I've had conversations with St. Louis City Food Bank or this foster care organization, or even in my past connections, if you want to know about or be connected to church planting in Bangladesh, I can get you in touch with organizations that are doing
Yeah.
that. And so those are just that's the cherry on top, I think, for us. We get to just,
Match
yeah,
passion.
man, how much fun is that? We get to dig through the strategy. We call it being in the trenches too, in terms of tax planning and proactive money management and things like that, all the things that we do in the firm. But then when you get to that point, we're like, okay, let's go back. That 100,000 in a donor advised fund. What are you going to do? What do you want to do? And Jim, we had somebody in not too long ago that they really didn't know. We created a list. Traditionally, didn't seem like very philanthropic, but there were quite simply tax advantages to giving money away.
Yeah.
And
Give it
so
to the
we get
government or give it to a charity of your choice.
so we got to help do that, and that's still a conversation that we're having with that individual. And that's the fun part. There's many fun parts, but that's definitely a very gifted one with this part of the industry. So knowing, hey, you want to know, I can get you in touch with the director of development for Impact City, no problem. And
But
that gives people the one-way direct touch point. That helps us serve them well, and then they get to feel cared for from from the recipient in terms of, hey, man, this is what we're excited about. Things that Impact City's doing in the next 3 years is going to look phenomenally different than even what's happening today. But we want our aspirations to match the funding that we receive along the way. And we need people like you to help us get there. I don't know. Does that answer your question? It's being inquisitive.
Yeah.
That's really
Let
what it
me
comes
let me
down
give
to.
you a personal example, Aaron, because we go through different stages in life. In our life, my wife and myself, and I have two children. One died. One went home at the age of 15. And in that process, our estate picture changed dramatically, where we were, and both of our kids were believers. The Lord, this was 25 years ago, so it was a long time ago. And we decided at that point, half of our estate would go into a fund that our daughter would then give away for the rest of her life. When we go on, we start involving our daughter in our DAF, or our charitable trust that we had set up. And she comes back to us and she says, this is the first year, and she says, Mom, Dad, can I tell you something? It's fun giving money away. And my gosh, you give money to 70 different organizations. This is really a lot, but could I tell you something? I don't want to hurt your feelings. And we were like, yeah, we want you to get good at this. And she
Yeah.
says, you help a lot, but you don't make a difference with anybody. And we were like, what? What?
Wow.
And it was like, oh, and she changed, transformed us from giving to 70 organizations to giving to three. And along the way, we had started this youth center that was impacting people in my son's memory. And
Yeah.
along the way, there was a lot of personal hurt in the nonprofit. So now, today, fast forward, how God has shaped us is we often give very few gifts a year, but more meaningful gifts to make a difference by learning what we say yes to. So, for example, I'm sure what commonly happens in your situation is you have a kid who Impact City has changed their life. I've heard the stories. Aaron, I've been to your events before where people's lives are changed. Some of your staff, they are there for a purpose, which
Yeah.
is always fun for us to see. Ryan interviews people, some of them on this call today, and gets they're just purpose filled. It's always a joy for us to see. But what we love actually doing is helping people figure out that in our own family, it was learn what we say yes to and what we say no to, and it leverage impact. We do a lot of matching. We are influencers. And then the next thing was like building something for us because of some of the emotional pain and hurt that happened in the youth center that we had created going under.
Yeah.
And us being me, my wife, and my daughter being personally hurt in the way it ended, was we started, it wasn't the nonprofit's intention at all. It was just there was bad, people had given their life and soul and not been healthfully taken along, being cared for. So, what we love to do is give to a ministry and earmark this for the top senior providers in that ministry, guys like you, Aaron, who give your heart and soul. You probably work, I'm going to guess 80, 90, 100 hours a week. Your family gets the short end of the stick. And if there was a gift that was given to impact Aaron and his family so that they are nourished, they are helped, they are supported, to give that 200%. I bet you we couldn't change the way you show up there at Impact City at all, but could we help you sustain it so you don't
Yeah.
burn out,
Yeah.
so that you don't, after 10 years, go, I got nothing left to give.
Thank you, Jen. That's
And that
great
became
insight.
important to your family, right? And I think that's the point. It's like everybody's got
Because of what
something
happened to
that
us.
they're
And I can
passionate about.
remember at the end of that youth center, me going, God, I gave you everything. Why does it? And then we got, oh, it wasn't our ministry. It was his ministry, and its time had come and gone. And we would later shape and impact others.
Yeah, it's beautiful. when giving comes from those things that are central to who you are and they match, I think that's where generosity starts to thrive in a major way.
With the final few minutes, Aaron, I just wanted to ask you, with Impact City, you guys have a lot of things happening right now. So I'd love you to have a couple minutes just to share. I know major stuff's happening here in St. Louis here
Yeah.
in the next immediate future, and anything else you'd want to touch on, because I know those are opportunities to invest in the community around here.
Yeah, we've got, for the first time ever in our history, we feel like we need to create a forever home for Jesus to be lifted high through the sport. And that looks like buying land and doing a development project, which we're not land developers. We've got a great committee of people who have done some real estate pieces in the past, but we're getting close to closing on a piece of land that we're raising money for. We've got phase one of
You guys
construction.
are close, Aaron. I remember the discussion about this last November. How far are you along that?
It's yet to be determined, but I would say this. I would say that sometime this spring, we should be closing on that land.
Is that right?
We're really excited.
Wow.
If I recall,
Congratulations.
some things are in the city's court right now, but it's just
Yeah.
a lot of logistics.
So we're excited about that. And getting the land is the first piece. And then phase one of construction is that next piece of fundraising that we need to get to. So those are two huge pieces going on in St. Louis, the land and the construction, to get space moving and going so that we can continue to love and care for people and families and point them towards Jesus and his life and his leadership as our example.
I'll say for anyone on the call, it's a DeLoach at impactcityfc.com. So if you, the specs, the pictures for it are, it's going to be phenomenal. And that's a DeLoach at impactcityfc.com. So you see his name here on the screen. But I know that information's quick to give. That's a very cool opportunity for people. And then for us, from a Trinity Wealth standpoint, we covered a lot of stuff here today, guys. I wrote down some things we covered that we barely touched on. Proactive tax planning. We touched on the market in general. That's a big one. And we're in a very unique space. We talk about everyday Jim. Whew, okay. So there's that. Donor advised funds, selling a business, charitable remainder trusts. That was mentioned, not explained, just touched on. Planned giving, exit planning a business. I know those are all things that we talk about all the time, every day, up and down the hallway, helping people with those types of situations. And so, one thing that I wanted to do is simply share. These are two different QR codes I'm just throwing up here. It's not fancy, but one you can scan. We do a quarterly market report. So someone who's not on this call is Jim Evans. He's our investment director or director of investment. I think we say it that way. He does a quarterly market commentary. Very thorough. Good gravy. So if you like charts, if you like needing to look up some words so that you understand it better, this is a great type of document, but also very approachable as well. And then two, we're usually a couple weeks out with making appointments, all those things we covered, and you go, I need to know more about this.
Yeah.
Those are things we talk about. So that's another QR code. We like to reserve certain spaces for people that we know more easily come in and get the VIP treatment of sorts. That's what that QR code is for. You can book an easy touch point with me and we go from there. Those are the QR codes. You do it now.
I would just say this, if you are listening on the webinar today, like whether you ever give to Impact City or not, doesn't matter. Like these are all tools that are helpful and that I would say, jump on it, learn some more, get with these guys at Trinity Wealth. I think it will be really helpful and truly fun for your family when you start to think about these things and be proactive. And maybe you give to Impact City, maybe you don't. There's a nonprofit that matches who you are and what God has put in your heart and your design. But I would just want to encourage everybody, get with these guys, get your tools sorted out. I think it will be really fun for you.
I love that because I appreciate I talk with my son about scarcity mentality.
Yeah.
And I hate it. There's always more people. There's always great organizations. And I've said that before in our past. I'm just glad you're given. And that's what we help necessitate along the way. So Aaron, thank you for joining on the webinar today. Jim, thanks for, as always, spitting out some expertise and grateful for everybody that attended. So if anyone that you know needs to hear these types of things, send it along. That's all fair game. And we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Sharing the Lord.